Hello people and welcome to Calciopoli. What a bad name. Yeah, I agree, that's a really bad name for a show like this, or whatever you want to call it. But the thing is, I've been struggling quite a lot to come up with a proper name, and I guess Calciopoli was the best I could come up with. Okay, but in this first episode we are gonna talk a bit about the FIFA World Cup and how they're gonna add more teams to it. In 2026, the plan is to have 48 teams in the FIFA World Cup. If you ask me, that's probably a bit too many. I think the structure of the tournament will be absolutely horrendous. And I think the way it is right now is probably the best. 32 teams. Anyway, let's take a deeper look into it. The first problem that will arise is the uneven number of teams in the tournament. And by uneven, I mean a number that doesn't add up to 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and you name it. The next step would then probably be to have 64 teams in the tournament, and obviously that's way too many at this point. The quality of the World Cup would be way worse. But at least the World Cup is not going to have the same tournament format as the Euros. If that was the case, then the 2026 FIFA World Cup will consist of 48 teams. That will mean 12 groups with 4 teams in each group. And you can sort of think a bit about it and say, okay, that doesn't add up. Like, how are we gonna have a fair qualification for the round of 16, or in this case, the round of 32? Boiling down to the knockout stages in the round of 32, that'll actually mean that 8 out of 12 third places in these groups will qualify, and only 4 third places will go out of the tournament. That gives a really bad dynamic to the tournament, and you can just look at the Euros in 2016 to see what happened there. It basically meant that the teams didn't have to go out and chase a result in the first group games, rather actually stay quite defensive on the field, not chasing result. That meant quite low average of goals in the first couple of matches, and you can actually see that in the number of average goals over the last couple of tournaments. If you look at this graph that goes back to 1980, you can see the number of average of goals in each World Cup and UEFA Euro. In 2016, the average number of goals was at 2.12 goals per game during the whole tournament, and that is the lowest level since 1996, where it was at 2.06 goals per match. And if you look at the graph, you can kind of tell that it's quite below the trend there is right now of goals per tournament. You can see in the FIFA World Cup it is a little bit higher, both before and after the 2016 Euros. It's definitely a limited number of games, so it might just be an outlier, but the fact is that you can kind of see why this would happen in the tournament. So a different part of this that's kind of unfair is the advantage of the teams in the later groups, because they have to play the last games based on results what already happened. So for instance, in Group A you would have the schedule such as the group will be ended before the last couple of groups. If you are in a third place in Group A, you'll be dependent on what happens in the next couple of matches in the other groups. And Portugal is kind of the best example of this. Now, of course, they didn't play to not win the games, but they actually ended number 3 in the group in the Euros with only 3 points from 3 draws. If you ask me, I think it's not so nice that the winner of the whole tournament ends up in the 3rd place in the group. Definitely mean that they wouldn't go through a normal group, and it was a kind of weak group, if you ask me. If you look at this small animation I made in PowerPoint, you can look at the European Championships in 2016, and this is the 6 groups, where Group A played first, and Group B, Group C, Group D, E and F. And basically what you could see unfold through the tournament was that The group number 1 and 2 would go through immediately after they had finished all the 3 group games. But the group number 3 would have to await other results in other groups. And that is basically why it would be a huge advantage to play in the end, because you already knew that, okay, this team in this group had 3 points. So you just need to go and get a draw, get 3 points, and maybe you had a better goal scoring difference. If you want to have an example of a tournament where the format makes it better for the teams to go and chase a result, you can just look to earlier this year in the European Under-21 Championships. It consisted of 12 teams in 3 groups, and only 4 teams would advance to the semifinals. So basically that meant that the group winner of course would advance, and 1 out of the 3 group number 2s would advance. So in this tournament it really meant that you just had to go out and get that win from the get-go in the first game. I mean, these teams normally don't play for draws, but they play less attacking football because they don't want to risk going all in to win the game for them then to lose on a counter-attack. It ended up having an average of 3.71 goals per match. Anyway, back to the World Cup. So how is this tournament format actually gonna look? So 4 proposals were made, 2 with 40 teams in the tournament and 2 with 48 teams in the tournament. The first 40 team in the tournament was an 8 groups of 5 teams. The second 40 team tournament would be 10 groups of 4 teams. The first 48 group tournament would be with an opening 32 teams playoff where 16 teams would sit over. And the last one, which ended up being the one they will use in the 2026 World Cup, is 16 groups of 3 teams where 2 teams will go through from each group. I mean, it's definitely better than the one in the Euros, but it'll still have a bad impact on the amount of goals per game. 2 out of 3 teams in a group go through, and that really doesn't incentivize the teams to go out and get a win, especially not teams who are on paper worse than the opponent. Of course, for FIFA there is a sentiment to have more teams playing in the FIFA World Cup, but the question is whether it'll make the quality worse of the tournament. Of course, the quality of the finals will still be the same, semifinals and quarterfinals, but a lot of the group stage games will actually probably end up being not so good as it has been until now. As it is right now, I would argue that within the last couple of years there's been 3 North American teams that has shown the quality to be at the World Cup consistently, and that is of course the United States, Mexico and Costa Rica. But in 2026 the plan is to include 6 North American teams in the World Cup, and I really don't know where this quality would come from. Some teams can get better by that time, but I really think that it'll have a bad impact of the quality in the tournament. So that is all for this video. In the future I'll have some videos about minutes played at the FIFA World Cup, what teams are the most represented. I have used a lot of time noting this data down, so I hope I will be able to show it to you in a really nice presentation. So please do subscribe, follow, please leave a comment, like the video if you like this, and see you in the future, guys.